On this week, we talked to Wise Components to see about their insights on the ICT industry. Welcome to the show where we tackle the tough questions submitted by installers, project managers, estimators, ICT personnel, even customers. On this show, we are connecting at the human level so that we can connect the world. If you're watching this show on YouTube, would you mind hitting the bell button and the subscribe button to be notified when new shows are being published? If you're listening to us on one of the audio platforms like Stitcher or iTunes, would you mind leaving us a 5-star rating? And if it's not a 5-star rating, let us know what we could do to make this a 5-star rating. Those couple little steps helps us take on the algorithm, which helps us educate, encourage, and enrich the lives of the people in our industry. Thursday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. What are you doing? Come hang out with me. Live stream on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, eventually Instagram, if I can figure that whole thing out, where we answer your favorite RCDD questions. All right. And you get to ask installation, certification, project management, even career path questions. I answered one last week. Somebody asked me about long hair. Should they get it cut? So if you don't catch it, don't worry. They are recorded and you can watch them at your leisure. Lastly, this content is always free and will remain free. We have ways that you can support this platform, such as Patreon, sponsorship. We even have programs where you can go and buy Amazon products and we get a small stipend off that because it costs money to produce this show. So if you want to be part of that process, just reach out to me and we'll help you with that. So Wise Components has been around for a little while. And I'll tell you this, my guest has a very good knowledge of some really great places to eat. And we'll talk about that here in a minute, right? So welcome to the show, Anthony Romeo. Anthony, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing well, Chuck. Thanks for having me. Let's talk cabling. Big fan.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. First off, I gotta admit, when you called me, I was driving from New York to New Jersey, and as I was coming up to the GW Bridge, where you got to decide whether you want to go upper or lower deck, to this country boy, that was a traffic jam. Yeah. And you called me just as I was coming into that traffic jam. I'm like, I am not answering this phone. I'm not answering this phone.
No, to most locals, it's still confusing.
Yeah. And of course, and the GPS, it just says take the bridge. It doesn't tell you take the upper or the lower till you're like right on top of it.
Yeah, and it's so congested too. So that makes it all the better, right? So, and in New Jersey, to make a left turn, you have to make a right turn.
Yes, you do.
So that's the other thing.
And then, but I'm glad I did call you because on the flip side, when I got on the other side of the bridge and I was coming down the turnpike where there was a little less traffic, I called you up and you recommended a place for me to go eat.
Oh yeah.
And at first, I got to admit, I was like, yeah, I'm probably not going to do that. But then when I got to the hotel and I pulled up my GPS list, boom, your place came up. Oh my Lord, was that's like the best place I've ever eaten. And it's funny because I do this intermittent fasting thing, right?
Okay.
Where
that's the place to go.
Yeah. So I fasted, I fast on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So when I get there and I order the food, the guy goes, have you ever eaten here before? I'm like, no. And he goes, okay, well, you probably want the single because it's going to be a big plate. You're not going to be able to finish that. I said, okay. I took his word for it. And he brought me out this plate. I'll tell you what, I'll put the picture in the video right here. Yeah. That sandwich is huge.
Yeah.
But when I finished eating, he's like, man, you must have been hungry. I said, I haven't eaten since lunchtime yesterday. What was the name of that place again?
Harold's Deli.
Harold's, that's it.
In Edison, New Jersey. Yeah, it's a famous place. Been around, no different than Jewish delicatessens in New York City, like Katz or Second Avenue Deli. They like to stack the meat, pretty high. So
yeah, yes, it was the best sandwich I've had in a long, long time.
Yeah, no, and it would stand the test of time in a lot of restaurants and businesses like that due to the unfortunate pandemic that we've been in for the last 2+ years. It's 123 weeks and counting for us that we instituted our program at Wise Components. So we're happy that places like that are still around and in business. Because we're out there, and when we need lunch, we got to go.
Yes, and it's funny because when I travel, I try not to eat at the national chains because you
Right.
can eat those
That,
anywhere.
I can't say how many times I would do the mom and pop over, Applebee's, or, you don't need to be consistent with what the plate looks like in Denver versus New York. And it's all about the experience. And it's a little different in the ICT world. You want consistency,
Right,
and
right,
you want it to look the same it looks in New York or Tampa or
right.
Cebu, the Philippines. You want that data center or MDF, IDF to look exactly
Yep.
the same. But when it comes to food, you want the experience to be, unexpected
Yes.
and pleasant.
It was definitely a pleasant surprise. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So why don't you give us the 30-second highlight of who you are and why should my audience listen to you?
Okay. Yeah. No problem. My wife has a problem with that, so I guess.
Mine too. Imagine that.
So I guess I'll talk to you guys then out there. Anthony Romeo here, about 20 years in this industry. Started in the United States Navy, came out looking for an adventure. My next adventure was helped by my father-in-law. He identified the wonderful world of telecommunications and started working for a contractor. And as I was working with many product manufacturers, as I was a contractor, cut my teeth, CommScope approached me and had a wonderful opportunity to work for them for nearly a decade. Learned a lot, met a lot of people, and along the way, I met one of my business partners today, Mark Zanes from Wise Components. And needless to say, it's been a great 5+ years now. Made an investment in a wonderful company that's been around for decades. As I was saying to Chuck, he has his acronym challenge, and many people don't know Wise Components is also an acronym, and it started on Westchester Avenue. It's industrial supply electronic components, as our primary business is providing contractors and end users premier lines in the low voltage infrastructure space. But we also have an OEM side of the house where we provide to manufacturing companies, the Siemens Company, Siemens Health, Abbott Laboratories, and many others around the globe, providing them whatever they need. So that's Wise in a nutshell. I myself have been here only for the last 5 years as managing director, supporting the sales efforts and some of the operations and the nuances so that we can continue to flourish as we've done for the last 5 decades. It's been a real treat, and many of the people that I work with and have the opportunity to work with here are so knowledgeable. And as I mentioned to Chuck in the past, we're not a design engineer house. We provide the premier lines that many of you out there in the ICT community need and want. It's not about just picking things up and putting them down. The logistics behind it is it's an orchestra, if you can think of that in a way. There's a lot of things that go behind the scenes to make it all happen and work where you need it, when you need it, at a fair price. In addition to that, being well educated, well rounded as a company of our size, we're flexible, and that's our biggest advocate to the market. We are not layers and layers and layers of management. So many of our employees that are helping the customers out there with their product needs can make recommendations based on products, based on availability, because there's no problem with the supply chain these days, right, Chuck?
No problem with the supply chain whatsoever. Yeah. So you are the host of a podcast.
Oh
right?
yeah, I do that too.
Yeah. You're like me. You wear multiple hats.
Yeah.
It just depends on what time of the day you happen to talk to me, right?
That's why I have no hair. I just ripping the hats off. Yeah.
Hello. I tell everybody I'm like this because I'm high speed, low drag.
Yeah.
Anything to slow me down. Why did you start doing the podcast? And
So
since you're doing the podcast, Are you also doing any kind of other mentoring? Because that's what really podcasting is, right?
Oh, absolutely. So we started the podcast back WiseUp back in 2019 when we started our educational newsletter called WiseUp. Why not? Well, the reason why we did it initially was, just to be honest, support web traffic. In the digital age that we live in, nobody's going to the yellow pages anymore. So we had professional help come to us and say, you need educational content. It's not about $5 now, act now, buy now, here we go. It really truly is not about hearing me babble about the products. It's about speaking to various manufacturers, end users, strategic partners in the workplace, in the data center, in the corporate office space, in the healthcare environment. We've had premier consultants like Cisco Hennessy talk about smart buildings. We've had JLL talk about the data center moves and the colo and the migration and the convergence of traffic. In addition to that, we've had premier product manufacturers, Cisco, Panduit, Leviton, CommScope, just to name a few, over the last couple of years, and it's gone really well. We can be streamed on Spotify, Apple iTunes, or basically however you stream. Right now, I checked, we're streaming in over 19 countries.
Nice.
So people do want to hear more about what we have to offer. And again, it's not a act now, buy now podcast. It's 20 to 30 minutes listening to, what's behind the walls, what's above the ceiling, what's making it all work. I know when I spoke to Ed Wagoneer, one of the CIOs of JLL, he went into great lengths talking about, looking out his window. JLL touches just about everything in 100 different countries. And everybody sees their trucks. Everybody knows that they're a building management company. Everybody knows them. But many people don't understand how that door opens up, how that elevator communication, you see that the video screen in an elevator now, or digital signage, or hot desking is something that's now more common. How does it all work? People just go about their lives in a hospital and or data center and or an office, and they don't know that there's glue holding that all together, and that glue is layer one infrastructure. Everybody knows Cisco, 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 Cisco. You see that advertised every 30 seconds on a truck, in a magazine, in a trade show. They're a wonderful company. Their switch gears and their wireless access points are superior to most. However, at the end of the day, if you don't have a QSFP, the right one, or SFP, all your active optical connectors, and they're bought at Bob's discount from some unreliable source because they were pennies on the dollar, well, that's expensive chassis is basically expensive chassis doing nothing. And if it doesn't sit in a good rack or management system or cable management, airflow, and it's just a multitude of things that happen and people take for granted because they don't know what's going on behind the walls or above the ceilings. So on Wise Up, we try to educate the people on, our listeners, on how do those things actually affect their everyday lives in those environments, whether it be an office, hospital environment, hospitality. We were talking about doing a podcast with Labs. We haven't done it yet, but they're in government space and they're in hospitality. Now, in my experience with EPON and GPON is limited, but in hospitality, one of the things that I've always seen, and I thought PON was a good solution for, passive optical network. When you're traveling, like Chuck and I and many of the listeners, when you're traveling for work, you're not bringing a printer and your desktop and plugging everything in your room. You just need a Wi-Fi network to connect, and you plug, do your business. That's it. But what happens in the hospitality specifically is the design of a hotel is done. They'll change the drapes, the carpets, the paint colors 42 times over the next 60 years. But they almost never rip and replace the walls behind or the infrastructure behind there. So that could be category 3 cable or even less than. And so the robust network, and then you're going down to use the lobby because that's the only way you can make a call, or the only way that you can get communication out on your desktop or your laptop rather, is because they put a band-aid fix on it. The hotels are infamous for that. I was just away with the family, and every time I had to make a call, I had to go down to the lobby. So upon, in my again, in my professional opinion, not to say it's the end all be all, and many buildings have different environments, so I'm just putting that out as a disclaimer. um, it seems like a good way to go about doing hospitality. But like I was talking to UTC, United Technology Corporations, $100 billion entity that deals with government contracts. They didn't like that, the level of security of it. Now, some people would argue and say it has everything and a bag of chips, so you don't need to worry. Um, but that's what the podcast is basically, doing. When we interview our guests, we're trying to not only highlight the features and benefits and where you could purchase something, but really, how does it work, and what is it the difference of? Is it just a passive infrastructure, or is it something that it's, the creme de la creme, the Rolls Royce of cars, the way Rolls Royce is to cars. Um, and we try to identify not just the structured cabling, but some other products out there that bring attention to current events. One of the products that we did a show on was Mercury Notifications. Mercury Notifications is a critical mass notification audio system that is able to integrate with existing PA systems, digital signage, as well as desktops and laptops, and provide a full alert SMS text notification as well. So it's an unfortunate current events that we continuously hear about, mass shootings, but they instituted in the state of Florida and the state of New Jersey. Governor DeSantis, as well as Governor Phil Murphy in New Jersey, instituted Alyssa's Law. Alyssa was the first victim, and it went on for 11 minutes. Had that notification system been in place, would it end everything? No, unfortunately not. However, it would mitigate a lot of the risk, and those 11 minutes might have went to 4 or even less than. But the one thing that it establishes, clear communication. It's not just pinging the local authorities and saying, "Hey, there's a shooter here." It's pinpointing, and we're able to pinpoint where these threats are happening. But this is based on not Wi-Fi. This is a structured cabling design on Category 6 cable. Um, and so these are shows that we're having where I learned about Alyssa's Law. I had no idea about Alyssa's Law, but bringing that attention to our listeners so that they're aware of Alyssa's Law. Alyssa's Law is now passed in New York as of last month. So K through 12 charter schools are being footed the bill through the state funding, so that they can institute, whether it be Mercury Notification or another system that could, help provide that mitigate risk. So you learn about these things on our show. As I mentioned, Siska Hennessy before. Siska Hennessy was talking about smart buildings, and it's not just about saying, "Oh, the doors open automatically, the lights set to certain, the curtains come down, the TV pops up."
Mm-hmm.
But running these buildings, and I was asked this question on my show, was during the beginning months of the pandemic when everybody was asked to leave these massive skyscrapers, the building owners, the question was asked to me was the building owners, how much money did they save not having all those people there in the building? That was the question that was asked to me. And I said, I had to think about it for a second, and then came to me and said they saved $0 because the HVAC system is still running operational. The lighting platform is still running operational.
Mm-hmm.
Everything about the heating system, whatever it may be, all operational. So they didn't save any money, right? So had this system, these systems, so we were referring them to dumb system. They're not dumb, but they're systems that are, expensive, that were installed without a network. So there's a convergence happening right now that's helping reduce the power consumption in a smart building, which truly is making it a smart building. So the building knows that, hey, there's a ton of light coming in the building on the west side of the building. Let's, open the blinds and lower the lumens and the lights. You can't do that on a regular platform because there's no network. There's no brains telling this to happen if it's not being monitored. So Local Law 97 was instituted back in 2018 or 17. Forgive me on the years. But what I found out from Susquehanna, Local Law 97, is penalizing building owners if they don't get their building up to code to reduce power consumption and their CO2 emissions of what they're emitting. So it's helping run those buildings more efficiently. Now, the fines that I don't know what the fines would constitute to the building owners, but some of them are acting upon it. Many of you listeners out there, you've been to a restaurant and you've seen a letter grade in the restaurant on the sanitary, or how sanitary a restaurant is. They receive a letter grade from A through C, or they're closed. Well, now buildings across the country, in many states, are instituting a similar program to Local Law 97 in the state of New York. In major cities across the United States, they're instituting this program, and they're putting letter grades on the building. So when you go into a building, especially in New York City, and you see this mixed-use building doesn't have a restaurant, and you see a letter grade in the lobby and it says C, it's not because there was a restaurant there. It's that letter grade is for the building inefficiencies, and it needs to be worked on. So I'm really excited about this because once again, it's another way that, let's talk cabling, that cabling infrastructure, the importance, it's the glue that holds everything together. And it's pointing to behind the wall, above the ceilings, and letting people know this side of the fence, the ICT community, matters. We always talk about the active switch gear and Wi-Fi and nobody really knows how the glue is holding this all together. I remember being in a meeting, which will remain nameless, of the architectural firm, but they were showing me this this university, prestigious university, and they had a classroom design of all glass walls. And around the classroom, there was the digital signage for the scheduling. There was huge projectors, smart TVs on the walls, again, glass walls. There was security cameras. There was access card readers to the glass doors. So I raised my hand in the room, being the smallest person on the totem pole, and I said, how does that get power and communication back? And very rudely, back response was, it's scoff, wireless. It's wireless. And I'm like, well, battery power will last for a certain point of time, and Wi-Fi connectivity does have its limitations, but wireless, which many people don't understand,
Needs wire.
A lot of it.
Yep. Yes, it does.
And sometimes even more cases than the traditional cabling, because it's going above the ceiling. You don't see it. You don't think about it, right? So that's what we're trying to do with WiseUp, is bring attention to the importance of the different products out there and how it goes to everyday life. So I mentioned Local Law 97. I mentioned Alyssa's Law. These are two different things, but again, they both are affected by structured cabling. It's the glue that's holding them together. And there's many other things.
I like the fact that you said you brought attention to, they don't know what's behind the wall. And that's a battle that I fight all the time. Because I tell people all the time, well, you're supposed to be putting in Cat 5e, though they recommend Cat 6. You're supposed to be doing Cat 6 for data centers, though they recommend Cat 6a. And some people are like, well, why do you need to put that in? It's why. because it's a lot easier to do that cabling job once.
Right.
And since the average lifespan of the building is 50, 60, 70 years, the average lifespan of a structural cable plant's 10 years.
Right.
Why not just put in a cable that's going to last maybe potentially longer so they can get better return on their investment?
Right. No, who wants to ignorance this place?
As far as labor is concerned, it costs the exact same amount of time and money to put in a Cat 5e system as it does to put in a Cat 6a system. Right. Where the difference of cost comes from is the materials, right? So, for not double the investment like a lot of people think it is, for a little bit more investment, you get way more return on your investment. So the WiseUp Podcast is educational platform, kind of like Wise. How often what days do you publish out on?
So we've been re-syndicating the last season of WiseUp this over the summer. We're going to start producing again in the fall of this year. We re-syndicate previous episodes from season 1 through season 4. But I have a lineup of people coming up again. And we'd love to have you on as well, because we definitely
do it. Let's get me on there. I'm okay with that.
Do that.
I'm over it.
It's so many different things out there. We had Sumitomo glass manufacturer, been around for about 400 years, which I didn't know as a company. 400 years old company. I was like, oh, I've been around 50 years. And it's like, oh, we've been around 400. I was like, oh, okay. Sorry.
I used to install Sumitomo air-blown products when I used to be a contractor out in the field. So for the world's largest office building.
Yeah.
Real interesting stuff.
Well, speaking about airborne fiber, Chuck, we at Wise Components, we actually we do a number of airborne fiber, not installations, but provide airborne fiber to transportation, broadcasting, healthcare, and retail space. So I just named 4 different verticals. One of the common threads that came across every conversation with that was CapEx, OpEx. Now, you just said to install 5E or category 6 is the same labor cost. You're right.
Right.
Now, when you're doing airborne fiber and having experience as a contractor, you know that traditionally, if you're going to lay conduit in the ground, it's one cost. To lay, whatever the conduit is, it's the same cost. Now, with airborne fiber, the benefit is that you have somebody in your closet, data center, or telecommunications room, and the other person on the opposite end receiving 150, I think it's 150 feet per second of fiber, and they don't disrupt a cost center. So we provided to NBC Studios in New York City at 30 Rock. Many people know 30 Rock from the comedic TV show. Yeah. Why they instituted it into multiple floors was they didn't want to shut down taping of any of their shows while contractors had to come in the building, and they didn't want to pay contractors at time and a half plus to come in
second shift, third shift.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In Newark Airport, one of the largest airports on the Northeast, they didn't want to shut down terminals to install fiber, so that's why they did it. The American Dream Mall, which is now, I believe, the largest mall, larger than the Mall of America, it's had a couple of setbacks because when it opened, the day it opened, that's when the governors instituted the work from home policies. So that was been unfortunate thing for them. But again, the retail market, as stores were coming in and they were providing the fiber needs to each retail store, they didn't have to disrupt the business in between. They can go from the closet and right to there.
Yeah.
And last but not least, with regards to ABF, a very prestigious healthcare institution in New York, they also ran it, and they did not want to disrupt any of their beds or their imaging center because they told me, they said, if they would have done that for the 3 days, they would have lost $1 million of revenue. And we're looking at a spreadsheet that's $180,000 and saying, "Oh, this is so much money."
Well, it's not just money either, right? I mean,
Yeah.
If that hospital or that healthcare agency is down for 1, 2, or 3 days, you're delaying
Right.
the delivery of healthcare,
Oh.
which may not seem important to you or I because we're both young guys here. Well, at least one of us is, right? Um, but that could have a severe impact to somebody's health, or delay somebody's surgery, or God forbid, somebody
Oh
could
yeah.
even pass away in that period of time because they didn't get the right. So there's a huge impact there.
Oh yeah, healthcare
Yeah.
was the biggest one, and we've seen a number of people that are looking to this as JFK we're talking to right now. It's still in the early stages, but there's a $30 billion renovation going on. So we're talking to some of the engineers, and again, Wise Components. We're a supplier, but we're a partner. We're a value add. I believe in many ways because we care about the end result.
Right.
We don't want the stuff coming back.
I think that shows in the podcast. I mean, because I listen, I'm a subscriber to your podcast. I listen to it, and one thing I've come to a realization when I started my podcast 2 years ago. I think it is now 2 years. Holy cow! Wow. There is people. I said this many times on my podcast. People they have such a negative association with millennials and the new generation. I'm telling you now, they are hungry for knowledge.
Right.
They just don't want to consume it the way that we consumed it.
Right.
That's
Exactly.
the difference. So if you want to teach them, you got to go where they're listening, and the podcast platform is perfect for that.
Well, it's funny you say about the way that they consume this, and both you and I, we were part of the Bixie the Bixie organization, and we both are part of the mentoring program as well.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things and I've been doing it now a couple of years. One of the things, it's about how they consume data, and the people that I've spoken to that are younger than me, they want everything video. They don't want to read anything. They want everything on video.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
there's a podcast. They tell me about a podcast. If there's a video YouTube that they could watch, and it works out for them, and they do it.
And here's the thing, right? Podcast platforms work really, really well in some parts of your life, and videos work really well in other parts of your life. And what I mean by that is, it's hard for me to stream a video on YouTube when I'm sitting in an airplane at 30,000 feet. It's hard for me to stream a video when I'm trying to decide whether I want to go to the upper or the lower level of the GW bridge. Right? So sometimes audio platforms better, and sometimes video platforms better. Right.
Well, and that's like airborne fiber or traditional fiber, or 5E versus 6.
I get that question all the time. That surprises me, because people will go out there and they'll say, "Well, Chuck, somebody asked me a question about copper, like Cat 5e, Cat 6, Cat 8, whatever," and I'll answer that question. And invariably, especially on TikTok, I'll get at least 3 to 10 responses. I'll just use fiber. Well, fiber is certainly superior in protection from EMI, and certainly superior in bandwidth, but it's not the end-all solution for every scenario.
Right? We find, from a selling perspective, we find that it's still probably a 60-40 split, and probably more of a 70-30 split if I think about it. The
copper fiber split, 60 copper, 40 30.
Yeah, I would say, and I say that with the dependent of verticals. So certain verticals in the data center market, fiber's king.
Yeah, absolutely,
no doubt about it. It's
because they need the bandwidth.
Exactly,
they need the bandwidth, and that's where the only thing that kind of even come into that ballpark is Cat 8, and to my knowledge, there's very few people that offer Category 8 cable and Category 8 connectors, and very few people who can actually test Category 8.
Well, copper is going to evolve. I feel,
it's
not only going to go Cat 8, Cat 10, Cat 11, whatever. You look, Leviton, Panduit, CommScope. I think there's one other, single pair Ethernet.
Yes,
right?
That's huge.
It's evolved, and I shouldn't. It's taking 3 of the pairs away, and it's evolved. So but it's found a need. Just like I remember when I was a manufacturer, the manufacturer was saying, "Oh, 5E, that'll be done in a couple of years." But then the whole security shift, and BMS is like, no, 5E has a need. Don't get rid of 5E. We need,
Right.
contractors and people were saying, no, don't get rid of 5E. We need the 5E.
Right.
Oh no, you could do everything with 6. It's like, no, there's applications for each. And that's why I say working with reputable, reliable resources, from your supplier to your installer to your engineering design team. It's important that they have standards, and that's what your show brings. It's talking about all the different standards that are out there. And if you're not, learning every day, like I was just saying before I started this, I was on a call with another product manufacturer because I don't know everything. I don't presume to know everything, and I will never know everything. And it's those people that have that attitude. Well, I did that back in 1985. I know, I learned that. And it's like, well, maybe it did a piece
Those are
of
the
it.
dangerous people, though.
Yeah.
Right? I've got 40 years in this industry, and I'm an RCDD, a Bixie technician, a former certified Bixie trainer, and I couldn't even count how many manufacturer certifications I have. And I do not refer to myself as an expert.
Right. You just know a little more than the next person, and that's that's it.
Right, exactly. And those people who say they know everything are the dangerous ones, because they don't know what they don't know.
Right.
And that's that. And when you're talking about, you mentioned a couple critical mission critical applications. One of the ones I used to do a lot of work in is law firms.
Yeah.
So we used to do a lot of work in this law firm in the Washington, D.C. area. They've since changed their names, but they were in the top 5 largest law firms of the country, and their main office was in D.C. And this is the story about when I actually had to fire my brother. We were pulling some cable in their data center underneath the floor. We were using a 1/4-inch fish tape going underneath, and he was pulling it back, and it snagged a wire, and he ripped it out and didn't realize it. He brought down their T1 circuit, which lost all the connectivity to all their offices in Cleveland and everywhere else.
Oops.
How much money did they lose?
Oops.
Every minute.
Yeah.
It's critical, and training is the best part. And that's kind of like I said, that's why I love the podcast, and I love the videos. That's why I'm doing the videos on TikTok and Instagram stuff,
Right.
because not everybody uses different platforms. And
I couldn't get over, Chuck, to be honest. During the pandemic, we instituted like many businesses, we instituted a program to help with business continuity, to ensure that we didn't skip a beat. We were deemed essential business because of many of the customers that we service. And back in November 2019, we got a letter that we were deemed essential. And it was from one of our international customers, and we had no idea what the letter was for. It was like kind of, oh, we're essential, joking about it and laughing about it now. But we had no idea. And then I had took a flight in February to California, and on my way back on an empty plane, we were hearing more about COVID. And I got my partners together and I said, we need some type of contingency to, if this happens, this is what we do. If this happens, this is what we do. And we put plan A through Z together. And, we've been on A since the beginning, fortunately, knock on wood, right? So what that instituted was everyone that was not picking, packing, receiving, nobody that was on the logistics side of our business was going to be needed in the building in the foreseeable future. Mm-hmm. We didn't institute for the 2 weeks. We said, we'll let you know in 2 weeks. And then, because that was what the governors put out, they said, oh, in 2 weeks, everybody's going to go back to it, if you recall, right? And that 123 weeks later, not the case. So to ensure the safety and well-being, and not knowing what we were dealing with, and not being medical specialists, we just said, hey, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to ensure that business continuity continues. And we did a great job at it. I have to, pat ourselves on the back. All the people were doing our Zooms calls, our Teams calls, and that's, again, bringing the reality to the importance of ICT. We can't do that if we didn't have a good network. And, many companies we're seeing now, they're instituting these same practices and the building in redundancies to their businesses because of what happened during the pandemic, because they can't do all the, virtual Teams calls. And
Right.
but we stayed active, during this whole time. The construction market, no doubt about it, took a hit, a significant one. But having the diversification that we do, we remained whole and profitable.
Yep. One final question for you. You've got a unique perspective of the industry because you see what people are buying, right? And you see where the needs are coming in. What excites you about our industry that's coming down the pike that's changing?
Oh, well, I started talking about it before. It's the convergence of all these different products, whether it be your HVAC system, your autonomous vehicles, all these different things that are coming online. The need of a network has never been more crucial and critical. And the layer one infrastructure is so important to that piece of that puzzle. It doesn't work without that glue holding it together.
Right.
So I'm excited of all the technologies that's to come. There's going to be a data center just about every other block in the future, because the amount of traffic and bandwidth that's needed to communicate with these cars. I remember reading an article years back from Warren Buffett, who invests heavily in the insurance market. He said he was deadly afraid of autonomous vehicles. And he says, not as an old man, that, with technology, he's like, it's gonna just disrupt the insurance markets, because who's insuring the car? Is it the car manufacturer? Is it the chip manufacturer? Is it the person receiving the data? Is it
those are great points.
Missing the data?
Great points.
So all these companies are going to have to take a piece of that responsibility, in addition to the person that's doing its makeup or drinking its coffee or making text messages. So it's going to be a collective effort. But again, the thing that excites me the most is that all these technologies need that glue, that ICT community that we are talking about on Let's Talk Cabling and WiseUp, and Wise Components is happy to be part of it. And I hope for another 50 years.
Yeah, it's, when I first got in this industry, there were two types of contractors: the telephony contractors and the computer contractors, cabling contractors. And you're right, everything now is just kind of all converging into one. And that's why I keep telling people, when they keep trying to do the minimum amount of possible, it's like, no, you don't know what tomorrow brings.
Right.
That's because you've only been in the industry for 1 year or 2 years or 5 years.
Right.
Over 40 years, the first probably 20 years, it moved to like 20 miles an hour. Then the next 10 years is moving at 50 miles an hour. Now it seems like it's moving at 100 miles an hour. Everything all kind of coming together. And
it's only going to get faster.
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't put in the right infrastructure, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. I built for those who know me know I have a homestead here. I've got a 3-acre homestead with chickens and ducks and geese and goats and all kinds of stuff. And we just built a new thing for our chicken house. And to keep the mice and rats out, we put down a concrete foundation. If I had to put down anything else, rocks or whatever, stuff would have climbed up through it. Did it cost me more to put in that concrete? Yes. Will the concrete last a lot longer? Yes. It's the same thing. Cat 5e or Cat 6a. Cat 6a will cost you a little bit more, but the benefits will far outreap, whatever additional costs it costs at the time. And just you need to think ahead and think in the future as much as possible. And some people say, well, Chuck, sometimes customers won't pay for that. I found that if you take the time to explain to the customer how their decision is going to cost them more money, and then document that conversation, most of the times you can change a customer's mind. Not all the time, most of the time.
Yeah, some people are not of the liking of changing their minds, but when you can convince them that they're going to spend more on the back end to redo what could have been done from the day one, then they'll do it.
Like the little Amco commercial used to say, you can pay us now, you can pay us later.
Right.
Hey, it's been a pleasure having you on, man. We need to have you back on again.
Yeah, no, definitely. I look forward to it, and we'll definitely have you on WiseUp talking. Let's talk cabling.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
All right,
Until next time, everybody, remember, knowledge is power.
That's it for this episode of today's podcast. We hope you were able to learn something. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. Also, leave a rating so we can help even more people learn about telecommunications. Until next time, be safe.